Principal told black student to play violin as a joke. What happened next shocked the whole school. When a principal uses laughter as a tool for punishment, and a violin becomes a weapon for ridicule, that is no longer education. That is humiliation. But sometimes, from that very place, a buried talent will rise. An intense and gripping story is unfolding. To follow the next chapter, don't forget to like and subscribe to Black Strength Stories so you won't miss the powerful and dramatic stories to come. On Monday morning, at exactly 7:55 a.m., over 800 students of Westridge High stood in perfect rows inside the main auditorium for the weekly flag-raising ceremony. The fluorescent lights shone down on long, neatly aligned benches where each student was expected to follow strict rules, regulation uniforms, sitting in the assigned spot, and maintaining absolute silence. On the main stage, Principal Aubrey, a white woman in her early 40s, known for her iron fist and a velvet glove approach, scanned every student's movement with razor-sharp eyes. Her hair was tied up in a neat bun, silver-framed glasses reflected the cold lights, and the faint smile on her lips only appeared when she was about to make a move. And then she saw him. At the far end of the hall stood Liam, a 17-year-old black student, a full head taller than his peers, leaning gently against the wall near the emergency exit. He wasn't seated. He didn't nod. He showed no sign of guilt. He just stood there, arms wrapped around a black fabric case, the object that would change his entire life from this day forward. Principal Aubrey's voice rang out, cold and crystal clear. "Liam Thomas Williams, why are you not seated with your classmates?" A heavy silence blanketed the auditorium. Almost instantly, every eye turned toward Liam. He shifted slightly, his back hunched, his face tense. "Ma'am, my back still hurts. I can't sit for long," Liam said, voice soft but steady. Aubrey pressed her lips together and descended the stage steps, her high heels echoing off the tiled floor like a warning chime. "Can't? Or won't?" she asked, each word laced with provocation. A few giggles bubbled up from the far left of the hall. Some students whispered behind cupped hands. A wide-eyed girl murmured to her friend, "Here he goes again." A blond boy snickered. "Probably danced too hard at the park yesterday." Liam bit his lip. He could explain. He could defend himself. But here, the voice of a black student often went unheard, especially when it contradicted the authority of a principal. As she approached Liam, Aubrey noticed the black fabric case in his arms and tilted her head slightly. "What's this?" "My friend's violin, Astrid's. I'm holding it for her before music class." "Oh, a violin?" she replied with a faint smile, as if spotting an opportunity. "Well, how perfect. If you feel exempt from the rules, perhaps you should showcase your talent at next week's spring concert." No one dared to breathe. Liam froze. He replied quickly, "I don't know how to play." "Then you'd better learn quickly," Aubrey cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. "The program requires a 3-minute solo performance. I'll sign you up today." The murmurs spread like a ripple. A student in the front row muttered loudly enough to be heard, "He can't even read sheet music. What's he gonna play?" "Probably just gonna make a fool of himself," another girl smirked. Liam felt his hand clench tightly around the violin case. He couldn't remember if he was even breathing. His eyes felt detached from his body, only able to see mocking faces and hear laughter weighing down the air like stones dropping into water. Aubrey returned to the stage, satisfied. A strike both sweet and cruel, delivered before the entire school, and no one dared to challenge it. Liam stood there, alone with a violin that wasn't his, in a world that mocked and ignored him. But what Principal Aubrey didn't know was that she had just triggered a chain of events that would shake Westridge High to its core and force her to confront the undercurrents she thought she had under control. On Friday morning, just one day before the humiliating flag ceremony, Liam Williams walked into his English class with a racing heartbeat and an apology already forming on his lips. He was 58 seconds late, according to the clock mounted on the classroom door. Not because he was lazy, not because he overslept. The math teacher from the previous period had held the class back a few minutes to go over a multiple-choice quiz. Class had already begun. Miss Ann, the notoriously strict and easily irritated English teacher, was writing something on the whiteboard. She didn't turn around, just dropped a cold remark without looking. "There's no seat left for you. Sit at the back of the room." Liam nodded, his eyes scanning for an empty chair. At the back, near the window, was a single lonely chair, one of those old blue plastic seats with faded metal legs, a wobbly backrest, and a sharp metal rod sticking out the back where a screw had long come loose. It should have been discarded long ago, but like many things at Westridge, it remained, waiting for someone not important enough to sit in it. Liam hesitated. He raised his hand. "Ma'am, this chair is broken." "Sit down, Liam. Don't interrupt the class." Ms. Ann didn't bother turning her head. Her voice was clipped, leaving no room for discussion. Not wanting to cause a scene, Liam carefully sat down, angling his body to avoid the exposed metal behind him. But 20 minutes later, while shifting to take notes, his back accidentally brushed against the sharp rod. A deep gash tore through his white uniform shirt, and blood began to seep through, though Liam didn't utter a word. When he could no longer bear it, Liam let out a soft groan. "What now?" Ms. Ann abruptly stopped her lecture and turned to glare. I got, stand up," she shouted. Liam didn't have time to react before her hand shoved the chair back into him, forcing his back against the blade-like metal. A piercing pain shot up his spine. Liam sprang to his feet, face pale. He stumbled a step and then stood upright. "Get out of my class. Don't come back if you're going to keep causing trouble." No one spoke. No one asked anything. Not a single student dared to intervene. A black student was injured right there in the classroom, and all that could be heard was the sound of chalk scraping across the board. Liam quietly left the room. Blood had begun to trickle down the waistband of his uniform pants, forming a red streak at his waist. He went straight to the boys' restroom, dabbed the wound with paper towels, and pulled his jacket down to cover it. There was no school nurse. No report was filed. Not a single witness stood up for him. That day, Liam didn't eat lunch. He sat alone by the football field, leaning against the fence, his back resting against the freezing air instead of cold steel. He didn't return to class for the last period, just waited quietly for the final bell. When school ended, he walked home in silence. 7 blocks, exactly 18 minutes, each step sending a sharp jolt up his spine. That evening, his mother, Clarissa Williams, a night shift nurse at the regional hospital, walked into the kitchen and froze when she saw her son take off his shirt. "Oh my God, what happened to you, Liam?" She dropped to her knees to examine the wound, her palms trembling. "It's just a mistake, Mom. A broken chair." She didn't believe it. "There was a teacher in the room, and she let this happen to you." "Please don't call the school, Mom. I'm begging you. It'll just make things worse." Liam looked up at his mother. No sulking, no anger, just a kind of deep exhaustion, like he'd grown used to swallowing his pain to survive another day. Clarissa nodded reluctantly. She cleaned the wound, disinfected it, and bandaged it with the practiced hands of someone who had saved people from stab wounds and gunshots, yet felt more helpless than ever because she couldn't protect her child. "Your father, He'd never have let anyone lay a hand on you like this. Dad's gone, and I don't want you to lose your job over suing a white teacher." In the silent house, only the sound of gauze soaking up blood could be heard. And somewhere in Liam's mind, a question kept echoing like wind through a narrow alley. If this is education, then where is justice? The cut would heal. But the silence, the being ignored, those wounds would live on in the heart of a student who had just learned another brutal lesson. Not everyone gets to be protected equally. That night, Liam lay on his side on the narrow bed, his back still aching despite his mother's careful bandaging. The ceiling was grayish-white. The hallway light cast a dim glow through the crack beneath the door. Instead of sleeping, he lay still, a strange mix of shame, anger, and something else he couldn't quite name rising inside him. Close to midnight, he sat up and opened the drawer of his father's old wooden cabinet, a piece that had remained untouched since the day his father passed away, when Liam was just 7. Inside was a brown leather photo album with frayed edges, a small strip of tape stuck to it bearing the scrawled words, "Michael, 1993 to 2006. As he turned each page, silent images surfaced. A young black man, tall, warm smile, eyes squinting every time he laughed. Wedding photos, pictures holding baby Liam, and photos with Liam's mother in her nurse's uniform from the early 2000s. But on the 13th page, Liam paused. It was a photo of his father, Michael Williams, holding a violin in his hands. No stage, no spotlight, just a candid moment. Yet his gaze was fixed on a distant space, as if listening to a melody no one else could hear. And his hands held the violin as though it were part of his own body. Liam pulled the photo out and studied it closely. He had never seen his father play. In his memory, the man was just someone who stroked his hair after nightmares, who sang him to sleep with hazy old jazz tunes. Not a musician, not an artist. Seeing the light still on, his mother stepped in. She looked at the photo, then sat down beside the bed in silence for a moment. "You didn't know, did you? Your father once studied at the Eastman School of Music, the fall semester of 1998, she whispered. He got accepted directly into the preparatory program, but after finding out I was pregnant with you, he dropped out and came back to work 3 jobs at once. Night shifts at the gas station, deliveries for a warehouse, and janitorial work at the church. All just to raise you." Liam was stunned. "I didn't know Dad studied music." His mother nodded. Then she stood up, walked into the storage room, rummaged for a while, and returned with a small rectangular wooden box with a brass latch. She opened it. Inside was a handmade violin crafted from a cigar box. The strings snapped, the wood scratched and worn. "He built this violin when he was 15, because he couldn't afford a real one," she said, her fingers gently stroking the edges. Even after getting a scholarship, he still practiced on this violin because he said it carried everything he'd overcome. Liam said nothing. He looked at the small violin, then turned to the sleek black case belonging to Astrid, leaning against the corner of the room. Ever since Aubrey forced him to perform, he hadn't dared open it. To him, it symbolized humiliation, contempt. But now, something shifted. The case no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a calling, from the past, from a father he had only remembered in fragments. A message appeared on his phone screen. "Astrid, I can help you, every night. 10 days left." Liam read the line again and again. He didn't reply. He wasn't ready to promise anything yet. But he opened Astrid's violin case. Gently. Let his fingers rest on the cold wood. Placed the bow against the string. No sound came out. But inside him, something had started to stir. Another message popped up from his mom. How's your back?" Liam looked at the message, then locked the screen. Not out of apathy, but because he didn't want to add more weight to his mother's worries. He turned to the violin. A strange feeling crept through his chest. Was it sadness? Was it anger? Was it resolved? Maybe it was all of them. And in that very moment, Liam whispered to himself, needing no echo, "She's not going to see me break." Not ever again. Reaching for the violin case, he took a deep breath. The night outside the window was still, but inside him, music was knocking, not out of obligation, but because it had always been there, just waiting to be awakened. The following evening, at exactly 7:12 p.m., Astrid appeared at Liam's doorstep with a bulging backpack and an unusually serious expression. "I'm not here because I pity you," she said as she stepped in, "but because I can't stand the idea of someone like Aubrey thinking you're going to fail." Astrid was the top student in music theory class, a 3-time winner of the junior strings state competition at the district level, and had once opened for the Chicago Philharmonic Youth Orchestra. But to Liam, she was the only friend willing to stand up for him, even if it meant going against the system. The first time Liam placed the violin on his shoulder, the pain nearly made him cry. His back hadn't healed. The muscles on either side of his spine were still swollen, and even the light weight of the instrument pressed hard against the unclosed wound. But he clenched his jaw and didn't let a sound escape his lips. Astrid began with the basics: how to stand with balance, place the violin between the neck and shoulder without lifting, and hold the bow with the first 3 fingers. "Just relax, like you're holding a calligraphy brush," she said, then smiled, or at least pretend to. The first sound that came out of the violin was a piercing screech, more like a knife scraping rusted iron than anything resembling music. Liam blushed, but Astrid just chuckled softly. "Not bad. You know, most people take 6 months to get a decent note. You've got 9 days. It'll be fun." From that day on, Liam practiced every night from 7 p.m. until almost 11. In the cramped kitchen, under the dim fluorescent light, the violin sounds filled the space, not beautiful, but rhythmic, not in tune, but determined. The next morning, he woke at 4:55 a.m., bowing in the living room while his mother slept. He used his 30-minute lunch break to sneak into the chemistry practice room, the best soundproofed spot in the school. There, he practiced a G major segment, just 4 notes, over and over for 15 minutes. His fingers blistered, calluses slowly forming on his left hand. By the 4th day, the school's backfield, where Liam usually practiced during PE, was locked down for sprinkler system repairs. He wandered around the D building, home to the arts classrooms, and stopped in front of Mr. Saint's instrument room. The door was slightly ajar. Inside was the scent of pine wood, rosin, and the faint sound of cello music playing from a ceiling speaker. Liam hesitated, holding Astrid's borrowed violin, then stepped in. Mr. Saint, an Asian-American man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a tall, lean build, looked up from the sheet music he was adjusting. He frowned slightly. "I thought you weren't one of my students." Liam nodded, speaking softly. "Yes, that's right. Principal Aubrey made me perform at the spring concert. To humiliate me. I have 7 days left." Silence. Mr. Saint placed the wooden flute he had been polishing to the side, then pointed to the chair in the center of the room. "Sit down. Open the violin. Let me hear what you've learned." Liam fumbled with the bow. His grip trembled. The G string buzzed. The D string choked between 2 misplaced fingers. But the teacher didn't interrupt. He simply watched, his eyes neither mocking nor pitying, just assessing, closely. When Liam stopped, his palms drenched in sweat. Mr. Saint nodded slightly. "You've got decent timing, though it's a little off-tempo with your heartbeat." Liam smirked. "I play from the heart. I've got no technique." Mr. Saint exhaled. Then he said, without a trace of a smile, "Music is not meant to humiliate. If you're going to play, it has to be because you have something to say. It doesn't have to be good, but it has to be true." "So, do you have something to say?" Liam stayed silent, but in his heart, hundreds of unsaid words were screaming. And he understood. From this moment on, he wasn't just practicing to survive the stage, but to speak for all the times he had been abandoned, for the silence in the classroom, and for the scars no one ever cared to hear about. His music would be the answer. The instrument room that day was as silent as an abandoned chapel. In the dim light filtering through the stained glass windows, Mr. Saint watched as Liam struggled to tune the strings. His posture was hunched, and both hands were trembling from a mix of nerves and back pain. "Give me the bow," he said curtly. Liam handed it over. Mr. Saint played a quick passage, Minuet in G by Christian Petzold, a beginner's classical piece with surprisingly emotional depth when played well. "Listen carefully. I'll only play it once." He set the violin down on the table, nodding. "Now, you try." Liam winced. "I don't know how to read music." "That's okay. You've got an ear." "An ear?" He didn't explain. Liam placed the violin on his shoulder, positioned the bow, took a deep breath, and began to play. The sound wasn't clean, the finger placement imperfect, but the melody came through in the right key, in the right rhythm, and the most astonishing part. Liam didn't recall it. He felt it. Mr. Saint raised an eyebrow, stepped back. "You play by ear," he said, like a doctor diagnosing a rare but precious condition. "You can hear, recognize, and replicate. That can't be taught. You either have it or you don't. And you do." While Liam was still processing that, Mr. Saint pulled a whiteboard from the corner of the room, started writing out notes, marking finger positions, and said, "This is Minuet in G. I'm going to divide it into 6 parts. Each part is about 20 seconds long. You'll learn 1 section a day." And from that afternoon on, a quiet pact was made. No one knew. No paperwork. No name on any official student list. Just Mr. Saint, a man who had once been accepted to Juilliard on a full scholarship in 1989, but abandoned his dream of performing because of debilitating stage anxiety, and a boy who had never studied music, who had only his ears, a wounded heart, and a longing to hear his own voice. Each afternoon, after the last period, Liam slipped through the back door of the music room. Mr. Saint had the violin ready, a warm towel prepared for Liam's back during breaks, and always kept a 20-minute countdown timer for each session, because he knew that going beyond that would flare up Liam's back injury. "I want to keep going," Liam would often say when the timer rang. "No," Mr. Saint would reply. "Playing isn't about punishing yourself. You need your body and your emotions in one piece." The clumsy sounds began to take shape. From squeaky, sliding bow strokes came melodies with phrasing, with emphasis, with feeling. Not perfect, but honest. He also taught Liam how to breathe, to count time with his feet, and to feel the vibrations through the body of the instrument. It wasn't just learning technique, it was learning to live with the violin as part of his body. One afternoon, Liam stopped midway. "Why are you helping me? I'm just some kid being punished." Mr. Saint looked out the window. "I used to play for the applause. When the stage swallowed me whole, I collapsed. Now I teach myself to hear again what I lost." He turned back. "But you're different. You're starting from pain. And you're slowly playing, not just to survive, but to live truthfully." That wasn't a comfort. It was a truth, evident in every line of his face. Liam nodded. Nothing more needed. That night, when he returned home, he opened Astrid's violin again. But this time, not to practice, to feel. He tried playing a melody he hadn't learned. The G string hummed low like the lullabies his father once sang. The E string rang out sharp, like his mother's gaze whenever she asked, "Are you okay?" For the first time in years, Liam wasn't just hearing the violin, he was hearing himself. And for a boy who had once been overlooked, pushed aside, that was a real miracle. After a week of rumors spreading, all of Westridge High was abuzz about the upcoming performance. And at the center of the attention, none other than Liam, the student once labeled a troublemaker, socially awkward, and even tagged by some teachers as a kid with no future. The school hallways became a constant murmur. Seriously? That guy plays the violin. Must be another one of Mrs. Aubrey's pranks. He's sneaking lessons with Mr. St. Bold move. Ms. Anne, the already harsh literature teacher, now openly targeted Liam in class. Whenever he gave an incomplete answer, she would mock, "So, are you planning to play the violin instead of writing essays?" Literature requires thinking, not bow-stroking. One day, she suddenly rescheduled the essay deadline for the topic, Intellect and Emotion in the Poetry of Sylvia Plath, from Monday to Friday, the exact day Liam had his final rehearsal. The essay required a minimum of 1,200 words and counted for 25% of the semester grade. It was clearly a calculated psychological blow. "Let's hope music doesn't make you forget literature," she said, not even bothering to hide her malice in front of a class of over 30 students. Snickers rippled through the room, and Liam gripped his pen as if it were a bow. Principal Aubrey, from another angle, acted more discreetly. An email was sent to Mr. Saint. "The instrument room will be temporarily unavailable after school hours for stage preparations." At the same time, the library, the small recital hall, and even the auditorium were all locked in the afternoons. With no place left to practice, Liam began training in the park across from the school's back gate in mid-March, when the cold wind still hissed through the bare trees. Every day, he brought his violin to a stone bench and practiced hastily as his hands went numb from the cold and back pain surged with each bend. One Wednesday afternoon, Liam was practicing the final part of Minuet in G, but kept losing the rhythm. Sweat soaked through his shirt, and he had to drop onto the bench, clutching his back. The violin lay at his feet like a traitor. He looked at Mr. Saint, who sat silently beside him. Then, blurting out in despair, "I can't do this." No advice or scolding came. The old teacher just sat next to him, eyes steady. "Then why haven't you quit?" Liam lowered his head. His eyes were red. After a long pause, he said, voice choked, "Because if I quit, they win. They'll think I really am what they say I am, a failure, a useless screw-up who never finishes anything." That answer was a declaration of war, not against music, but against the condescension and invisible violence pressing down on his back. Hearing about the essay, Astrid immediately offered help. "I'll draft it, you read. I'll recite the poems, you analyze. I'll ask, you answer." Just like learning a piece of music. And so, on a windy evening under the dim glow of streetlights in the park, a strange scene unfolded. Astrid reading lines of poetry. Liam practicing the violin while learning to analyze Plath's language. They tied the poet's painful words to Liam's silent suffering. And every piece of literature was understood not just with intellect, but with the unhealed scars on his back. Liam memorized each argument, every citation, as if he were memorizing chords. Each night, he stood before the mirror and read the essay aloud while adjusting his bow hold, In the darkness, in the wind, the clumsy sound of the violin and the piercing poetry echoed like two inseparable heartbeats, one of defiance, the other of rising above. And Liam began to understand. To stand on that stage, he didn't just need to play music. He needed to prove that someone like him, wounded, judged, pushed aside, could still win without losing himself. Wednesday afternoon, after the last class, Mr. Saint called Liam out to the back gate, where his old Ford Escape was waiting. "Get in. There's somewhere I need to take you," he said without further explanation. The car drove through the town center, past tree-lined streets, and stopped in front of an old music shop called Rossetti's Music and Restoration, located on Oak Ridge Street. The wooden sign was faded, but inside was tidy and filled with classic charm, like stepping into a miniature museum of the sound world. A small bell tinkled as they stepped in. Behind the counter stood a thin Italian man with a long silver beard and eyes that sparkled like someone who had just remembered an old tune. "Liam, this is Mr. Rossetti, the shop owner. He's a rare instrument restoration craftsman, once worked for Juilliard. I apprenticed under him back when I was a student." Liam bowed respectfully. Mr. Rossetti smiled warmly. "You're Saint's young student, huh? Let me see your hands." He took Liam's hands, examined the calluses, and nodded thoughtfully. "Not your average student's hands. The bow angle's off, but there's spirit." Then, as if urged by something, he pointed to a wooden chair in the corner of the room. "Sit down. Play me a piece." Liam hesitated, then placed the violin Astrid had lent him on his shoulder and played the middle section of Minuet in G. The sound still trembled, but it had rhythm and clear emotion. When the final note echoed, Rossetti stood frozen, then exclaimed in a thick Italian accent, "That vibrato, it's Michael's. Do you know Michael Williams?" Liam froze. "He's my father." The room fell silent. Rossetti turned away, walked to the glass cabinet behind the counter, opened the third drawer on the left, and took out a polished walnut violin case, gleaming from years of care. "Your father brought this violin to my shop 17 years ago. He needed the money. He had no other choice. But he was clear. Don't sell it. I'll buy it back, no matter how long it takes." Rossetti opened the case. Inside was an old Guarneri violin with a faint crescent-shaped scratch on the back, a mark of time. He paid in installments, $50 every month, sometimes 20, sometimes 100, and he paid in full, right up to the week before he passed. Liam stood still. His hands trembled as he touched the neck of the violin, feeling like he was grasping a long-buried part of himself. He lifted the instrument and played a G note, deep, warm, and resonant, like a call from the past. At that moment, Mr. Saint pulled out his phone and opened an old video he'd saved on his hard drive for 20 years. On the small screen appeared a young black man with eyes full of passion, performing meditation from Thias at the Eastman School of Music in 1993. That man was Michael Williams, Liam's father. Liam held his breath. The way his father moved the bow, powerful yet tender, firm without being harsh, was exactly how he had vaguely imagined it when he first listened to the violin in his life. Rossetti placed a hand on Liam's shoulder, speaking gently. "Your father never came back for the violin, but he knew someday someone would come in his place to retrieve it." Liam couldn't hold back the tears. He carried the violin home in silence. When his mother opened the door and saw her son holding that familiar case, she froze. "That's your father's violin?" she asked quietly, her voice cracking. Liam said nothing. He placed the violin on the table, played the video Mr. Saint had given him, and let her watch every note her husband once played, the sound she hadn't heard in over 2 decades. When the piece ended, she collapsed into Liam's shoulder, crying and laughing all at once. Your father once said, if he couldn't pass on his dream, then at least he'd leave the violin behind. And you are the one writing the final chapter of that music. This year's Westridge High Spring concert unfolded under a strange atmosphere. Unlike previous years, when only parents and a few members of the local community attended, this year, the auditorium was packed, and all the invitation tickets were gone within the first 2 days. No one said it aloud, but everyone was there for one name: Liam Williams, the black boy the principal had once wanted to turn into a joke. Principal Aubrey, with her neatly combed hair and deep purple dress, stepped onto the stage to scattered applause. She held the microphone with a self-satisfied expression, her voice echoing through the sound system like a narrative being rewritten. And now, to close the evening, we will witness the result of a rehabilitation effort. A student who once faced many challenges, but under the right guidance, is now ready to deliver the final performance. She had barely finished her sentence when a deep voice cut in. Allow me to correct that. The entire auditorium turned its heads. From the 3rd row, a middle-aged brown-skinned man stood up. He wore a light gray suit and the badge of the State Education Board, and many immediately recognized him. Dr. Beavis Duane, director of the Eastman School of Music, one of the most prestigious music institutions in the United States. I'm not here to evaluate a rehabilitation project, he said firmly. I came because of a talent nomination from a respected music teacher and a practice clip that I watched 8 times. Silence fell across the room. Liam was called onto the stage. He wore a white shirt, dark trousers, and old leather shoes that had been polished carefully. But what left the hall breathless wasn't the outfit. It was the antique Guarneri violin in his hands. A spotlight shone directly on Liam. In front of him were over 400 people. Behind the curtain stood Astrid and Mr. Saint. And in the balcony, his mother held her hands tightly together. With the first scratch of the bow, Liam closed his eyes. He began playing Minuet in G, the piece he had once played in pain at the park, practiced with frozen hands in the cold, cried over when he couldn't keep rhythm. But tonight, he was in full control. Each note rang out not only with timing and dynamics, but with soul. The audience could hear endurance, love, and the loneliness of a child growing up in a cold system. And more importantly, they could hear crushed hope resurrecting through music. There were sniffles from the front rows. A woman wiped her eyes. An elderly man lowered his head and clapped along. Astrid held Liam's mother's hand, hiding her emotion as she watched her best friend play, not just with his hands, but with his memories and his future. At the back of the auditorium, in the shadows, 2 men in police uniforms and 2 officials in blue blazers stood silently, exchanging words through earpieces. Principal Aubrey, who had been smiling earlier, turned pale as she noticed the presence of the North Carolina State Education Inspector and representatives from the Wake County Police Department. When the piece ended, the hall held its breath for 1 second, then exploded. Thunderous applause erupted. Everyone stood. The first was Dr. Duane, who stepped onto the stage and shook Liam's hand. You are not just talented. You are living proof of what music can do, to heal, to resist, and to triumph. He turned to the audience. I will grant him an interview for Eastman's most prestigious scholarship. And I believe those of you in the education field should ask yourselves, are we supporting students or destroying them? At that moment, the inspector stepped up to the podium. We are authorized to announce that Principal Aubrey and Ms. Ann will be under investigation for allegations of student abuse systemic discrimination, and abuse of authority. A wave of murmurs spread across the hall. Principal Aubrey stood frozen. Ms. Ann, sitting below, turned ghostly pale. It all began with two seemingly unrelated details. A practice video was secretly recorded by Mr. Saint as evidence of Liam's real ability, and a medical report from the clinic where Liam's mother took him to get his back checked. By law, any injuries caused by external force must be reported to the local Department of Education, and from there, the entire investigation unfolded. As for Liam, he quietly stepped off the stage, holding his father's violin, surrounded by never-ending applause. But inside him, there was no pride, no satisfaction, only one thing. At last, he had given his father a reason to lift his head with pride from the other side. Monday morning, after the concert, the Durham Morning Tribune released its latest issue with a bold headline on the front page: "From Shame to Glory, the Boy and His Father's Violin." Beneath it was a photo of Liam bowing amid thunderous applause, the Guarneri violin gleaming under the stage lights. The article quickly went viral on social media, shared over 30,000 times within just 24 hours. A 3-minute video clip capturing Liam playing the climactic section of Minuet in G was uploaded alongside it, garnering more than 2.4 million views in only 3 days. Comments poured in from all over: amateur musicians, music teachers, and students who had endured discrimination in school. At Westridge High, a quiet but profound shift began to unfold. Principal Aubrey and Ms. Ann were officially suspended indefinitely. The State Board of Education moved to revoke their teaching licenses, pending further investigation. Within the school, anonymous student surveys on discriminatory behavior were implemented, and the results stunned the administration. 38% of students of color admitted they had experienced discrimination at least once during the school year. Dr. Evelyn Gaines was appointed as the replacement, an education specialist from Boston who had led the Safe Sound Schooling initiative to combat racial bias among faculty. In her first week, she enacted a comprehensive code of conduct and launched mandatory training for all staff on unconscious bias self-audits. As for Liam, the changes came like a whirlwind. One Friday afternoon, he received letters from the Berklee College of Music, Juilliard Pre-College, and the Charlotte Center for the Arts, all inviting him to perform and offering scholarship opportunities. But Liam simply read them, folded them neatly, and placed them in a drawer. "I don't play music to become famous," he said in an interview with a young reporter named Mina Caldwell from the North Carolina Tribune. "I play because it's the voice I was always too afraid to speak out loud." After filming Liam performing in a small practice room with his father's violin, Mina edited together a 5-minute short film titled "The Boy Who Played His Father's Voice." That video became a sensation, featured in CNN Local's Stories That Heal series, and spread across arts forums like Strings Magazine and Classical Music Daily. Mr. Saint, due to his pivotal role in Liam's journey, was appointed head of the music department by the school board. The first thing he did was launch a free weekend music program for students of color and those from underprivileged backgrounds. The funding was approved immediately after more than 150 parent signatures of support were submitted. Astrid, Liam's quiet companion throughout the journey, was also nominated to attend the New Horizons summer music camp alongside him. Dr. Duane personally wrote letters of recommendation for both of them. In the days that followed, Liam returned to the park where he used to practice violin in the freezing wind. But this time, he wasn't alone. More than a dozen students gathered every weekend to learn their first notes. His father's old violin had now become the center of a circle of new hopes, and when a mother walked up to ask who her son was learning from, the little boy pointed at Liam and said, He's the one who turned pain into song. On the evening of September 18th, the prestigious auditorium of the Eastman School of Music was illuminated by hundreds of stage lights and the presence of nearly 600 guests, from academy directors and sponsors to industry professionals and media. In the fourth row, Liam's mother sat next to Astrid, clutching a wrinkled handkerchief. Her eyes were red, but her gaze was filled with pride. When Liam stepped onto the stage, he wore a soft black suit, a pearl-white shirt, and a pair of old leather shoes polished to a shine. In his hands was still his father's Guarneri violin, now restored by Mr. Rossetti himself. The warm golden light fell across his face, as if summoning memories. The broken chair, the blood seeping through his shirt, mocking laughter, and that very first trembling note played under the dim kitchen light. But now there was no shame, no fear, only music, rising like a roaring flame, shattering every ceiling that once confined him. Liam chose to perform Massenet's Meditation, but not the traditional rendition. In the middle, he added a short improvisation using double-stop technique, blending classical melody with a touch of soul music his father once played on an old acoustic guitar. The hall fell silent. A female music professor from Juilliard later recounted, "In that moment, we weren't just hearing a violin. We were hearing the heart of a family, a people, a life that dared to survive." When the final note rang out, a 3-second pause of reverent silence followed. Then the hall erupted. Applause, cheers, people rising to their feet, some in tears. Dr. Beavis Duane stepped onto the stage in a deep blue suit, holding a microphone. Eastman officially awards Liam Williams a full 4-year preparatory scholarship, and today we announce a new scholarship, the Michael Williams Fellowship, for talented students who were once denied opportunity because of circumstance. As Liam exited the stage, a reporter from the New York Classical asked, "What would you say to those who are being underestimated the way you once were?" He paused, his eyes still glowing under the lights, and replied in a calm, warm voice, "When they hand you a violin as a joke, make it your voice. Don't answer with anger. Answer with talent." That night, when Liam and his mother returned to their small hotel on the corner of Elmwood Street, the two shared instant noodles like an old ritual. She looked at her son, smiled softly, and whispered, "Your father is smiling from above." Liam didn't reply. He simply bowed his head and gently touched his forehead to the violin. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The beginning of a musical journey, of a voice rediscovered. The beginning for children like Liam, those who had been dismissed, silenced, but who still held on to the one thing no one could ever take: talent. And above all, hope. Finally, a letter arrived from the Eastman School of Music, the place his father once gave up on his dream, confirming Liam Williams would give an official performance at the Academy's Fall Music Festival with his father's violin on the very stage where Michael Williams had last played 17 years ago. Liam began that concert with hands once bloodied from silent practice and ended it with thunderous applause from the very hall that had once expected his failure. From a student once looked down on, he had become a symbol of courage, perseverance, and the voice of those forced into silence. But more than a story of music or personal triumph, this raises a deeper question for society. How many other Liams are being buried under prejudice, turned into punchlines because of their skin color, background, or differences? And will we, the ones watching, choose to remain passive spectators, or rise to protect the talents that haven't yet had a chance to bloom? What do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Are our schools truly lifting up potential or quietly extinguishing it? Don't forget to like and subscribe to Black Strength Stories so you won't miss the next powerful stories. Stories of resilience, justice, and strength that must never be forgotten.